I wanted to mention a little bit about the VO2 and how that increases from your basal needs, like if you're resting, to when you start walking, to running, to max exercise, and that what that VO2 max looks like, because we can start to see some interesting things like with the oxygen deficit that's created. So, for example, if I just drew a little graph right here, all right, we'll go like this, and we'll say this is your VO2, and on this axis will be your time. And we'll say you're at rest right here. So at rest, your VO2, we'll say, is around 300 milliliters per minute. And now you're going to get up and start walking somewhere. What's that going to look like? Well, immediately you're going to get up, and your VO2 is going to start to increase, and then you'll reach a steady state, and then you'll be like that. All right. So now let's say this is around 1 liter, right? So here is rest. Here you are walking. And now you want to say, hey, let's go for a jog, actually. And so now it's going to increase again. And then you're here. So now you are doing a jog. And now you want to say, I want to actually pump it up a little bit, and let's go for a run. And now you start to increase that. And now you're running. And we do, and each one of these are going to go up more, right? So like that's now the jog is say 2 liters per minute. And let's say your run is, let's do a pretty fast run. So let's go do 3 liters per minute. And now you would think, all right, let's see what I got in the tank, and let's really go out. And you're going to push yourself. Your VO2 is going to really start to climb, and then it's going to kind of slowly kind of plateau, right? And this would be your VO2 max. And this correlates with you have an increase in intensity, but yet you just can't get your oxygen consumption to go any higher at all. That's your VO2 max. And now let's say that this happens at around 4 liters per minute, right? Now, what's interesting here is how the oxygen levels increased. So if we took and we made like kind of a basically we took and we made a square of this here, right there. We do the same thing with this one here, here, and then over here. All right, so all of this, you're not getting, you're not able to use the O2. The O2 wasn't used, and so that's actually a deficit. It's called the oxygen deficit. So the question then is, what's going on? Like if you're just resting, you're going to get up and go for a walk. It took you, anywhere from 1 to, well, maybe we would say 2 to 3 minutes in order to reach what's called steady state, where again it's going back to the ATP flux, right? ATP flux. So where does this first ATP, in order for you, because you do start walking, you got out of the chair and you started walking, what gave you the energy to do that if it wasn't from your oxidative phosphorylation? Well, it's from your anaerobic pathways, right? So we have our first one here be our ATP-PCr, and so this is our system, we'll say. And how long does this one last for? Where it's the predominant form of energy, right? Is the predominant, and we'll say instantly, like from the get-go. Like when did that time instantly? become predominant, it's going to be between 0 to about 10 seconds, as you know, right? 0 to 10 seconds. And how long and when is it going to reach its peak? Basically, its peak activity. How long? We could say like time until, okay, time until peak activity. Again, this was like immediate, right? 0 to 1 second. I mean, the ATP is already there, and then as soon as the ATP is depleted or it's been used, you quickly rephosphorylate it with the creatine phosphate, so your ATP doesn't actually get depleted. Just your creatine phosphate gets depleted, and your ATP concentration stays pretty much the same. Now you have your glycolysis. And this one, it's going to be predominantly activated between your 10 to 30 seconds or so, right? You could even argue even more, I'll say 45 seconds actually. There are some nuances. It could even be longer than that. We'll say 45 seconds. And for how long it takes to get its peak activity, I don't know, pretty fast, like 5 to 6 seconds or so. And then we have your oxidative pathway. And this one, there's some nuances here, because sometimes when the studies will look at, they'll measure all the ATP, but they're like, okay, if they took the average ATP, well, we know in the first 10 seconds it came from ATP, from ATP-PCr. And then the glycolysis, the next part was glycolysis. And so sometimes it'll be like, a minute and a half, 2 minutes before they say, okay, so now the total average came primarily from oxidative phosphorylation. But again, if we look at the instantaneous time point where it became predominant, then depending on the situation, it could be as early as 45 to, say, 75 seconds. Again, it's going to depend on the athlete. If you have somebody who's a top elite endurance runner, lots of type 1 muscle fibers, lots of mitochondria, maybe they're already warmed up, all of these things, well, then they're going to turn that oxidative system on, and it could be predominant within 45 seconds, maybe even a little bit sooner than that. But if they were to measure, let's say do the 400, let's do a full, let's say 60-second 400, maybe it would take the full 60 seconds before they say, okay, well, the first 45 seconds was primarily glycolysis and ATP-PCr, but the last 15 seconds was primarily your aerobic respiration, oxidative pathways. And that's what I'm saying, 45 seconds, but it could be longer, 75 seconds, depending on type 1, type 2 muscle fiber distribution. So it just depends. But that's the time it can be the primary system that's providing most of that ATP. And then it still is ramping up. It takes time to ramp up. And, it really kind of depends. It could be, it takes maybe 1 to 3 minutes, depending on a lot of variables, for it to reach its peak level. And if we look at another thing, I'll say the relative resynthesis rate. Resynthesis rate of ATP. Well, your ATP-PCr, we can say, is around 4, and this is glycolysis around 2, and this is about 1. So glycolysis is about twice as fast as the oxidative system, and the ATP-PCr system is, a lot faster. All the ATP is already there. Okay, so just again to clarify is your oxidative pathway, it does take some time to ramp up to get fully activated. Typically, we say like 2 to 3 minutes or something in order to maximally activate your oxidative system. And that's why when people are training for their VO2 max, you want to run for at least 2-3 minutes, and you do something like 3 to 5 minute runs. That way, you have like a couple minutes at running at your VO2 max, and that way that system's fully active when you're doing that training. But yet, depending on the athlete, the ATP can be quite predominant, can be the predominant one quite quickly on. And this also kind of explains, as I was saying with the oxygen deficit, this can be different for different people. But it's something else to consider. Sometimes, like if you're when you immediately get up and you're gonna go walk up the stairs or something, you might find yourself you're quickly out of breath, and you're like, "Well, why is that?" Like, because usually it's really easy. Part of it is because you just create an oxygen deficit, and so maybe you made some lactate, you did anaerobic metabolism, and so now even though you're done with that exercise because you just walked up the stairs, you've got to recover all that. So you're still having that we call EPOC a little bit too, right? The exercise post oxygen consumption as well. All right, just wanted to give you those things to think about. And again, this also helps to explain why during certain training, why we train certain ways that we do. And also this here, why when you get to VO2 max, is again, I just want to clarify again that you increase your exercise intensity, but your VO2 just doesn't increase anymore. You've started to plateau. So, all right, thank you.